Hey, this is Dr. Mark Whitlock, pastor of Reed Temple AME Church right here in Glendale, Maryland. Welcome to Reed Temple, the James A. Parker Lay Organization Social Action Committee Candidates Forum. It's today that we have an opportunity to share your views, to share your points of interest, to share your thoughts about the future of Prince George's County. We are excited that you're here. We look forward to hearing you with bated breath. Let's have a great time today. Let's reshape, let's remodel, and let's reinvent ourselves here in Prince George's County. God bless.
Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Owens, and I am the president of the Iota Gamma Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and it is our pleasure to partner today with the Reed Temple James A. Parker Lay Organization Social Action Committee in presenting today's candidate forum for the candidates running for the 4th Congressional District here in Prince George's County. We are so honored that you took the time this afternoon to join us to hear what these candidates have to say so you can make an informed decision when you vote at the primary election coming up in next month. Congratulations to all who are running and taking the time to be willing to serve. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say in terms of how you can help us to grow better and do better in Prince George's County. Again, welcome and thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our 4th candidate forum in the series of candidate forums that have been presented on behalf of the Reed Temple AME James A. Parker Lay Organization Social Action Committee. My name is Terry Williams, and I will be joining you today and introducing to you the Reverend Janelle Johnson, who will serve as our moderator for the candidate forum for the Congressional 4th Representative District. Currently, Reverend Janelle Johnson serves as an ordained minister at Reed Temple AME Church in Glendale, Maryland. Recently, she has accepted a new position at a cabinet level agency as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, where she will lead President Biden's executive order to further diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce. Prior to the federal service, she worked for several technology companies, including a 7-year tenure at Lockheed Martin, where she was promoted several times and served as a corporate diversity manager. In 2014, her commitment to social justice, education, and equality led to her appointment as a commissioner by the county executive to the Prince George's County Human Relations Commission, the civil rights agency for the county, to investigate and enforce all federal discrimination laws within its jurisdictions. She was elected as vice chair of the same commission in 2017 and served until October of 2019. As an advocate, she moderated a panel discussion at the 2019 Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, the annual legislative conference. As a part of her commitment to continuous learning, she earned a certificate in theology and ministry from Princeton Theological Seminary in 2017 and has recently completed a degree from the George Washington University School of Law. She holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from George Mason University and a master's of science degree in business at Johns Hopkins University. She is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And this afternoon, I am honored to present to you our moderator for the afternoon, Reverend Janelle Johnson.
Thank you so much, Terry. And it's such an honor to be with you today. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And again, my name is Janelle Johnson, and my church family calls me Reverend Janelle Johnson. So to remain safe, we are joining virtually today as we are still navigating through the pandemic. And though we are navigating through this together in community, our democracy continues. So we thank you for joining us today for this incredibly important forum. We are living in an incredibly important time. And so, where your vote is a consequential vote. I want to thank the James A. Parker Lay Organization of Reed Temple AME Church, the church where I serve and worship. And I want to thank our pastor, Reverend Dr. Mark Whitlock, for allowing and supporting us today and partnering with us, as well as the Iota Gamma Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and President Cheryl Owens for her leadership to ensure voters are informed, educated, and empowered to vote. Let me share this with you. The Pew Research Center noted that overall, Black Americans are more likely than the larger U.S. public to both say it is important for sermons to touch on political topics and to hear sermons that actually do. The faith community plays an incredible role in educating voters on the issues. And so today, we will educate, inform, and inspire you to use your voice to vote. And we're going to have a little fun while we do it. So let's use this time to educate. If we could bring up the slides, please. As we noted before, we use this time to educate the voters on the process, and that is the role of the faith community. So with that, let's move forward. Please note, if we could go back, please. Back one slide. I do have a couple of items I need to share. Thank you so much to our technology team. You must request a mail-in ballot from the State Board of Elections or your local board. Your request for a mail-in ballot for the gubernatorial primary election must be received by July 12th of this year and by November 1st for the gubernatorial general election. Mail-in ballots must be postmarked or placed in a designated ballot drop box by 8 p.m. on July 19th for the gubernatorial primary election and by 8 p.m. on November 8th for the gubernatorial general election. To vote in person, Marylanders can vote during early voting or on election day. Early voting will be held for 8 days. Again, early voting will be held for 8 days from Thursday, July 7th through Thursday, July 14th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the gubernatorial primary election, and from Thursday, October 27th through Thursday, November 3rd, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the gubernatorial general election. You can vote early at any early voting center in the county you live in. The gubernatorial primary election day is July 19th. I'll say that again. The gubernatorial primary election day is July 19th. The gubernatorial general election day is November 8th. To vote in person on election day, vote at your assigned polling place. Let's stay informed and don't forget to exercise your vote. Your voice, it matters. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Just a few items I want to share with you really quickly to make sure that we're on the same page and starting from the same baseline of understanding. What's important to note about primary elections is the following. The primary election is an election used to narrow the field of candidates. And forgive me for reading to you, but I want to highlight this because it's important. It's to narrow the field of candidates for a given elective office or to determine the nominees for a political party in advance of a general election. Primary elections can take several different forms. In a partisan or closed primary, voters select a candidate to be a political party's nominee for a given office in the corresponding general election. Hear me, Maryland is a closed primary election state. Voters must affiliate formally with the political party in advance of the election date to participate in that party's primary. Generally, only registered voters affiliated with the Democratic or Republican parties may vote in that party's primary election. It's important to note that you need to be registered with either Democratic or Republican Party to vote in the primary election. If there are no nonpartisan offices that are elected in a primary election, i.e. school board, any voter can vote for these offices. If you do not select a political party on your voter registration application, you will be unaffiliated with any political party. This means, okay, hear me, this means that you will generally not be able to vote in party primary elections, but you'll be able to vote in any nonpartisan primary election held in your jurisdiction, such as primary election to select nominees for the Board of Education. Next slide. So redistricting has been a huge topic of conversation. Redistricting is the process by which new congressional and state legislative district boundaries are drawn. District lines are redrawn every 10 years following the completion of the U.S. Census. The federal government stipulates that districts must have nearly equal populations and must not discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity. Here's what you need to know about the 4th District. Maryland adopted new congressional district boundaries on April 4th, when Governor Hogan signed revised redistricting legislation that the General Assembly finalized on March 30th. The governor signed the new map after State Attorney General Brian Frosh withdrew his appeal of Circuit Court Judge Lynn Battaglia's ruling overturning the state's previous congressional redistricting plan. Today's forum will present U.S. House of Representative candidates for District 4 in Maryland. Next slide, please. Maryland is divided into 8 congressional districts, each represented by a member of the United States House of Representatives. After the 2020 census, the number of Maryland seats remained unchanged, giving evidence of the stable population growth relative to the United States at large. Next slide, please. The Prince George's County anchored 4th District remains one of the state's 2 majority-minority congressional districts, where 55% of the population is Black and a quarter of the population is Hispanic. So clearly, diversity and representation is clearly pronounced in District 4. Next slide. What does this mean to you in District 4 regarding the congressional representatives? Let's talk about it. A total of 469 seats in the U.S. Congress are up for election on November 8th. The U.S. House of Representatives, also known as the House, the United States is divided into 435 congressional districts, each with a population of roughly 710,000 individuals, apportioned among the states based on the 2020 United States Census. Each district elects a representative to the U.S. House of Representatives for a 2-year term. Representatives are also called congressmen or congresswomen. Among other duties, representatives introduce bills and resolutions and offer amendments and serve on committees. With that, let's begin. I'm excited to introduce you to the congressional Democratic candidates for District 4. Each candidate will begin with a 3-minute opening statement. Now, since this is a faith-based supported event, I would be remiss if I did not say that in the Old Testament, God moved by signs and wonders. So to all of the candidates, if you go over your 3-minute threshold of time, you're going to see my face. That's the Lord giving you a sign that you're over your 3 minutes. So if candidates could keep their opening statements to 3 minutes, we will greatly appreciate that. So the order of the candidates will be Angela Angel, James Levi Curtis Jr., Donna Edwards, Gregory Holmes, and Glenn Ivey. Let's begin. Delegate Angela Angel.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, giving honor to the pastor of your house and First Lady. Also want to give a shout out and honor to the pastor of my house where I worship, First Baptist of Glenarden, under the tutelage of Pastor John K. Jenkins Sr. So blessed to be here. to be among folks of faith. You know, I am Delegate Angela Angel, and I am running for Congressional District 4 here in the state of Maryland. I am running for this seat for the same reason that I run for every seat that I've ever held. It is because I firmly believe that I need to be in the room. And when I say that I need to be in the room, I mean my voice. And I don't just mean my, second soprano. I've been on a couple of praise teams, but I mean that the voice of the people that I bring into the halls of power. I mean, as a Black woman, as an attorney, as a mother with 5 children in our school system, and a small business owner who has lived through so many ups and downs in this county. I understand the needs of the people of this district in a way that no one else on this panel does. And not only do I understand the needs, but I understand how to use the legislative process to meet those needs and to bring the change that's needed. And how can I say that? Because I have the record and the resume to show that. Now, I know I look young, and don't let this baby face fool you. I am actually the only candidate on this panel that has held positions in every level of Maryland government. I started off with the O'Malley Brown administration as the Prince George's County coordinator. I worked for the Prince George's County House of Delegates as their legislative coordinator, ushering all of the bills through the House. I then worked for Councilmember Derek Leon Davis, doing social work and education policy. I then was elected and was so proud to represent District 25 in the Maryland House of Delegates, where during my time in the House, I passed more bills than any other member of my chambers. And because the House is actually a part-time job, I simultaneously worked under County Executive Rashern Baker as the legislative counsel for the Department of Environment. When I say I know how to bring change and how to move this district forward, I've shown it time and time again. I am a firm believer that you need to improve any space that you occupy. And I understand how to use government and relationships to create policy and bring change to our community. And that is something that I have done time and time again. Not only have I done it on every level in the state of Maryland, I also have federal experience and have been working on the Hill since 2000, working with groups like NAACP, National Urban League, and the Black Women's Roundtable to bring federal policy to head. Recently, I worked on the People's Response Act, as well as the federal infrastructure bill. Thank you. We need an angel in Congress.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from James Levi Curtis Jr.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Levi Curtis, and I'm running to be your 4th congressional representative. A little bit about myself. I'm a Prince George's County native, born and raised in Capitol Heights, and graduated from the Forestville Military Academy. Once I left Forestville, I went on to Albright College, and I received my bachelor's degree in accounting, economics, and finance. Now, once I left school, I had the chance and the opportunity to work on the federal level at the State Department, with Maryland State Government, with the Department of Health, balancing budgets and creating fiscal policies. So that's kind of really what my strong point is and what I bring to this race. It's the fiscal side. And everybody knows that right now, we kind of need that right now. That's me, but this forum is really about you. The reason why I'm running is really about the people. Inflation is out of control. Gas prices are out of control. Your rent is out of control. Food is out of control. And where's the help? I'm offering this solution now. We're tired of doing the same thing here in Prince George's County, having all the fancy degrees and the fancy titles, but come up empty in the end. We're going to change that this election. That's why I'm running. My name is James Curtis, and I'm running to be your next congressional representation.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we will hear from Donna Edwards.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. I am so grateful to be able to join you this afternoon. I am Donna Edwards, the former Congresswoman for the 4th Congressional District. I am pleased to join you this afternoon to talk about you and what the needs are for the 4th Congressional District. I have the privilege of having served in the Congress for almost 5 terms as the first Black woman elected to Congress in the state of Maryland. But this election is not about the past. In fact, it's about the future, and it's about your future. I know that all of us are suffering through the rising inflation, the rising cost of gas, the results of what we've seen of the pandemic, and that pandemic is not over. The pandemic actually exposed really significant challenges that are faced by our community in the 4th Congressional District that we knew always existed, challenges and inequities in healthcare and education and the economy and the way that we grow Black-owned businesses. And the reality is that we can't go back to what was normal then. We have to create a new normal, and that normal has to be one that's inclusive, where Prince George's County and Montgomery County receive the benefits of the bargain for all the taxes that we pay, where we grow our infrastructure, grow our economy, expand our education system so that it's meeting the challenges of the future. And so I am grateful to have the support of House of Representatives, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, a lot of my former colleagues to return to Congress with my seniority and my experience, and also the support of labor unions and environmental organizations and community-based organizations and leaders throughout our county and throughout our state and across the country. Because now is the time that we need experienced leadership to deliver on the benefits of democracy, to deliver on our economy, and to make sure that Prince George's County gets its fair share. And I look forward to the questions that we are going to have today to answer your questions, both about my candidacy and about the way that we see the future. Thank you very much for your time and attention this afternoon, and I look forward to joining you further.
Thank you so much. Now we will hear from Gregory Holmes.
Good afternoon. This is Gregory Holmes. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the Reed family for putting this forum together. I'm a 3rd generation Prince George's County resident, been married 28 years, have 2 incredible sons that are 21 and 25. And so I think it's important to know a little bit about who would serve you, as opposed to all the wonderful things we think we want to get done. I've lived in this county for over 60, I have a 60-year history in this county. Actually, my parents owned a business at Landover Mall growing up. So I know what it means to have both impact in the house and in the professional side of things. But that experience, watching my parents work all day and then go to Landover Mall and run a business until 10 p.m. at night, showed me 2 things. It showed me perseverance. It showed me a willingness and an ambition to create opportunities that build a legacy for your family. And it just showed me hard work. And so that's what I bring to this campaign. I understand the county. I'm from the county. I represent and look like the county. And we're in an economic potential explosion in the county. We have almost $8 to $9 billion worth of economic opportunity, either planned or in the pipeline in Prince George's County. So we have the infrastructure in place to turn around the economic tsunami that our previous colleagues have talked about. What we lack is the new leadership to actually make it happen. And so that's what I bring to the table. I bring that experience from being in the county and understanding the landscape. I understand the future, because we can't look to the past to create a new future. It has to be new through a change in leadership. And that's what I bring to the table, is an economic vision for how to take a Black-owned business who grew up in Section 8 housing into a profitable business that builds a legacy for the future. And so I look forward to speaking with you further. I do want to shout out my First Baptist of Glen Arden family. My wife and I are actually in our 3rd year teaching a ministry class there. And so we understand the impact the economy is having on families. As we teach our class, we see the impact on families and husband and wives as we teach our class of this economic tsunami that's happening. But we can get through it with new leadership. The opportunities are there. The infrastructure is here. The planned development is coming. It's who has the leadership mindset and the vision to actually connect those opportunities to Black business development to win for the community. So I look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Now we will hear from Glenn Ivey.
Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address this forum. I also want to thank Reed Temple and the AKAs for putting this together, and Pastor Whitlock and the First Lady for putting this together, and the great work that they continue to guide Reed Temple in doing. I'm the former state's attorney for Prince George's County, and in that context, we did a lot of things. This was from 2002 to 2010. When I first got in office, we had about 173 homicides in Prince George's County. And so one of the things we wanted to try and do was reduce that number dramatically. At the same time, we also had the challenge of police accountability. As many of you may recall, back in 2002 and before, we had police shootings where people were being killed, unarmed people had been killed, and there was excessive force being used, but we weren't getting convictions against those police officers. We thought we had to address that as well. And then the last big piece of what we thought we had to take on was to try and reverse the whole approach that prosecution and police had taken in the wake of the war on drugs. And that included massive incarceration, trying to arrest our way out of the problems. We ended up with a scenario where we had 2.2 million Americans in jail, more than any other country in the world, including China. And so we came in and we worked to reverse all of that, and we were successful in a lot of that work. I want to walk through a little bit of that real quick. First of all, with respect to the intervention prevention programs that we did, we knew that we weren't going to be able to get everybody, once they got in the jail system, it's hard to get back on track. So we wanted to try and reach out, especially to young people, before they got too deep into the criminal justice system or before they got into it at all, and try and help them get back on the right track. We also wanted to work on reentry programs, because we knew that 99.9% of the people that did go to jail were going to come back out. And we also needed to do initiatives that addressed major problems that were being that hadn't been confronted. Domestic violence was one of the principal ones that we took on, but gangs was another. I want to say that we were really successful in all of those efforts. And I want to point out, too, that we didn't do it on our own. We did it in part with the faith community, and Reed Temple was a key leader in the efforts that we had there. For example, with domestic violence awareness, Reed Temple was a key sponsor of many of the forums that we put on, and also helped to provide individuals and leadership who partnered up and assisted women, typically, who were survivors of domestic violence and needed help with that. Reentry was another one. When I got in office, we didn't have government funding to do much with it, but there were faith community leaders who were already in the jails trying to help people with the transitions. Wow, 3 minutes already. But I'll stop there and do more a little bit later. But I do want to thank Reed Temple for the work that it's done and the partnership that it gave us, along with the police, and the positive impact that led to. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you to all of the candidates for your opening statements. Much appreciated. Now we will move to the part of the forum where we're going to ask several questions, actually about 5. And we're going to ask that you keep your comments or responses to 2 minutes. Respond to them in 2 minutes. I want to share with the audience that none of these questions have been shared with the candidates. And so we're going to hear their very candid responses to how we will address some of the challenges. As a member of the clergy, I would be remiss if I did not say that sometimes politicians and members of the clergy have one thing in common. We tend to be a bit long-winded. I say that with all love and sincerity in my heart. But I am asking each of the candidates to please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you in advance. So we're going to move to the first question. The first question I'm going to ask James Levi Curtis Jr., to respond to first. And the question is as follows. Student loan debt is an impending issue at the federal level. What is your stance on student loan debt and forgiveness? And does your platform include any policies on this issue? Mr. Curtis, your response.
Well, thank you for the question. Absolutely. Let me just say this. Student loan debt needs to be canceled 100% across the board, period. And I'll just get a little bit personal. I got $40,000 of student loan debt on my head right now. Okay. I went to school in Albright College, which is in Reading, Pennsylvania. But I had to kind of be smart about it. This is where my Prince George's County savvy came in. So what I did was I partnered with the community college that allowed me to go to school year round. So while I was in term in, the fall semester, I would come back during the winter and go to school at community college here. That allowed me to graduate in 3 years to save my family a whole year tuition. So we need to actually open up the community colleges a little bit more so and use that, because that's a secret weapon that we have here in this district that we need to get people in. Now, a lot of people don't go to these community colleges because simply they can't afford it. And we're way past the time when we need to go ahead and make community college free. We're trying to build our people up. We're trying to invest in our community, but we still have these barriers here. So community college should be free and student debt loans should be free. Now, the question is, how do we get there? We got to create a new stream of revenue. Okay, we got to close some of these tax loopholes that these corporations keep getting away with. We close these tax loopholes. We create a new stream of revenue where citizens of Prince George's County can go to Prince George's County Community College for free, no questions asked. Now, I do ask that if you want to go to college or you want to go to trade school and we're going to foot the bill for it, I ask you put your best foot effort forward to at least maintain a 2.0 GPA. You do that, we'll be able to educate you and get you the trade that you need. So that's what my plan for student loan debt is. We're going to wipe it out and we're going to make community college free for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Delegate Angela Angel, please, your response.
Absolutely. I am a proud HBCU graduate. Shout out to Hampton University. Also a graduate of Cardozo School of Law with Yeshiva University. I have about $150,000 in student loan debt from my different degrees. So I'm proud of my education, but I know how much it comes at a cost. I am an absolute advocate for student loan debt forgiveness. It's one of the things that I think we are already on the pathway to. Currently, we know that President Biden is talking about expanding it it's been talked about between $10,000 to $30,000. There's a lot of things that we can actually do legislatively. There are also some things that the Department of Education can do that as a member of Congress, I will be advocating for them to do, such as changing some of the rules around what qualifies for public service credits, such as looking at right now, it has to be you paid your loans consecutively while you were actually getting the service loan credits. But many of us know if you're serving in public service jobs, you might have taken the deferral because you weren't making enough money. So one of the pieces of legislation I'll be pushing is to allow non-concurrent payments and to allow cumulative payments to get people to the 120 payments faster. We also know that there are some things such as changing some of the requirements for what qualifies us to do some of the student debt loan programs, and also advocating and educating people that you can actually still get credit for zero payments. And so instead of using deferrals, you should be using income-based repayment programs where you may qualify for a zero payment, but that zero payment will actually allow you to still rack up time that is accrued towards making your payments, your 120 payments that are needed to forgive loans. All of those things are things that I will be working for to both educate and advocate for student loan forgiveness in office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Glenn Ivey, your response.
Well, I'm in favor of targeted student loan forgiveness. So let me say this, for example, Bill Gates's kids don't need a break on student loans. If they ever had to take any out, they probably don't. But, if families have the wherewithal to make those payments, like mine does, for example, they shouldn't be given student loan forgiveness, because we need to take that money. We don't have unlimited amounts of money. We need to take that money and actually give it to people who do need it and can't go to school otherwise if they don't have access to those kinds of loans. The other piece is grants. One of the big pushes that's happened on two fronts is to make sure that schools that have the ability to step up on the financial aid front do more of it. And some of them have gigantic endowments. Princeton's endowment is over $40 billion. They need to do a lot more with student loan forgiveness and assistance. And in fact, they moved to primarily grant programs. I think we need to expand that as well. To the extent you've got people who got loans and they're having trouble making payments back, I think Delegate Angel's on the right track with respect to giving them other opportunities at forgiveness or repayment, reduced interest rates, not having to make all the payments consecutively and concurrently. I think we also need to make sure we give breaks to people who go into public service positions and aren't making the kinds of salaries that they might make otherwise, but they're doing something to help the community that we like. Teachers, for example, I think would be a real important target group. We're having trouble finding more teachers or enough teachers. Here in Prince George's County, we sometimes have classrooms that have 40 plus kids in there. We need more teachers to come in and stay in the profession, and student loan challenges is one of the things that keeps them out.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Former Congressman Donna Edwards, your response, please.
Thank you very much. Look, I share the view that the United States is holding on to, frankly, too much student loan debt. About $2 trillion worth of student loans are out there waiting to metastasize against all of us in the economy. And so it is something that we have to do something about immediately. I believe in student loan debt forgiveness. I came out of undergraduate school as a first-generation student at Wake Forest University, and then in law school at the University of New Hampshire with nearly $100,000 in student debt. In fact, I paid off my very last student loan on the morning of the day that I was elected. I won a primary race for Congress back in 2008. And what that does when one is holding on to all of that debt, and frankly, more African-American people of color are holding on to more of the debt to service their education, is that it holds people back from participating fully in the economy, in job creation and growing small businesses, in buying homes and all of the other things that people do when they're not saddled with that debt. And so it's incumbent on all of us to forgive that debt, to encourage debt forgiveness in exchange for public service, for educators, social workers, mental health providers, all of these things that are public services that are so needed in so many of our communities. And the benefit for all of us, whether we hold that debt or not, is that we get a new generation of young people who are able to participate effectively in the economy. And so I support the proposals that President Biden has, but even going beyond that to free community college, to making sure that college is affordable, especially public college and trade school are affordable. And I look forward to being in Congress to make sure that we can bring this to fruition.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Mr. Holmes, Gregory Holmes, your response, please.
Yeah, thank you. Reverend Johnson, I think I'm a little old school. I was always raised, nothing's for free in this world. That's how my grandparents raised me. My son, a month ago, just graduated from the University of Maryland. So I understand firsthand about the cost of college. But there, as I shared with him, as he moves into the corporate world and wants to be an entrepreneur, you don't get bailed out as a small business. There's no free lunch as a small business. So we can't say on one hand, we want to be educated and go to college and not be able to read the documents related to what I just signed. I can't raise my son to be dependent and think he's going to get a bailout on anything in life. He's a Black male. And so I do echo some of the things from a public service standpoint. There should be some type of trade-off and a cap on what a forgiveness is, as the Biden administration is proposing. But again, we were raised in a different generation where there was no free lunch. And so we have to make sure that before we sign documents, that we fully understand what our fiduciary responsibility is, or how are we going to say we're going to build wealth in our community if we can't read a document between the age of 18 and 20 and 22? That's not building wealth, that's building dependency. And so I'm just a little different as it relates to this. And so I'll yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. On to the second question. And this question I'm going to ask former Congresswoman Donna Edwards to respond to first. And the question is, reparations have routinely stalled in the House, but a commission to study the issue now has support for passage. Do you support moving forward the legislation for reparations for American descendants of slavery? Congresswoman
Absolutely.
Donna Edwards, thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely, I do. I actually was one of the original co-sponsors when that reparations commission bill was introduced. I would support it again going into the House. We obviously would need to move it from the House into the Senate, but I think it is long overdue. And after all, what we're talking about is a study that would examine the history, would examine and make recommendations about how reparations could work. And the reality is that all across the country, a lot of universities are engaged in a very similar kind of process, including my former university, and I headed the committee at Wake Forest University. And so I think certainly if that is true, then it certainly should be true that this is something that we should study in the Congress and then move forward with more concrete proposals in terms of implementation.
My apologies. I didn't realize I was on mute. My apologies to the candidates. How long have we been in COVID and in the pandemic? And I still don't know how to work the mute button. So I asked for a little bit of grace. Thank you for your response, former Congresswoman Donna Edwards. Mr. Holmes, can you please answer the question, your response?
Absolutely. I agree with Mr. Edwards. I would support a study to understand not only the economic repercussions, some of the past systemic issues that has gotten us to this point, but also the study has to go a little bit deeper. I think it has to include more of economic cyclical approach, where, as a lot of us know, the dollars in the Black community only circulate one time. And so there has to be a mindset or a new philosophy as it relates. It just can't just be about reparations. It has to be about a new generational mindset of how our dollars circulate in our community. Because you can put bad money after bad money, or we can create a new dialogue as it relates to the circulation of dollars to create the wealth that we want in our community. That's the first thing on the congressional side. But let's be honest, we would need 60 votes in the Senate to get anything passed. And so, yes, we can pass bills in the House, and legislation is good, and we can kind of be excited about that. But can we really get the Republican colleagues in the Senate to get on board with 10 votes as it sits now, a 60 vote margin to get reparations passed in the Senate? I think that's a high bar. And so I think there are other things that we can do to maybe streamline a process to get actually what we're trying to get done. But what you do in Congress is, that's what you do as a congressperson. But to really get it implemented, you're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. And that should be part of our study, is to start cultivating those senators who may be supportive of some version of reparations. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Mr. James Curtis, your response.
Absolutely, and for reparations, period. We don't have to do no studies. They've been doing studies since President Kennedy was in office in 1960. We know what happened, okay? We know our history. Our reparations should come with not only just some money, but also a piece of land. How many people we got in apartments here in Prince George's County? Imagine if you had an acre of land to call your own, to raise your family up on right now. We've already done the work. 400 years ago, our ancestors put in that hard work for us, okay? It's time for our fair share, and now is the time is here. You're right. We have to get more people on board to make this dream a reality, but we don't know what the futures hold, what the senator hold, what the next election hold. You may never know. We may have both houses again with majority. We don't know that. We can't predict the future, but what we can do is introduce legislations that not only pay us back for what our ancestors did, but also give us a piece of land for our families.
Thank you for your response. Glenn Ivey, your response.
Sure. I mean, this is a huge challenge. I think all the previous speakers raised fair points. I was working for Congressman John Conyers when he first started pushing the concept of reparations in the late 1980s. And I think he moved to the study approach later on when it became so challenging to get sufficient support to move the legislation forward without, leading with the study first. I'll note this too. I mean, I do believe there are other groups who have gotten reparations. I believe, for example, Japanese Americans after World War II and the like. But look, the bottom line is, I think we all know the injustices that were done. I was at the African American Museum a little while ago, and pretty much the United States was built almost entirely on slave labor, on stolen labor from African American, our descendants, our predecessors. And so we know that the justification for it is there times 10. Now, whether the politics of it come together ever, I think is an open question. I think it's a huge challenge to expect that to happen, certainly under the current numbers, as Mr. Holmes pointed out. But I do think it's important for us to continue to fight for it. And at the bottom line level, fighting for the history of it, because the challenge is to critical race study, which isn't even in the public schools, but the Republican Party's using that to push back against the Democrats on a variety of issues. One of the things they want to push back on is the actual history that happened here in the United States that would justify reparations. So I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us. I think it's a good goal. I think it's the right goal and it should happen. Whether it actually happens or not, I think the jury's still out.
Thank you for your response. Delegate Angela Angel, your response.
Absolutely. Reparations are critical. I actually have worked on HR 40, which is the current bill that's moved in the House. And I'm glad to have worked with Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. She's someone that I've worked with for years on various issues. And she is one of the lead sponsors and heavily advocating for this. This commission is also already being accomplished in California on another bill that I've actually had some research and worked on, where they just released a 500-page report of recommendations and surveying the atrocities that we know slavery caused, as well as the systemic outcomes that have resulted for Black Americans as the vestiges of slavery. So we actually already have steps and data already that's begun, and California is on a great track that everyone that is involved in this type of legislation, this type of advocacy work, are following. So we are already creating some steps for the federal government to follow. And there are actually already some great groups. I'm proud to be a part of the working groups that work on this issue that are moving this forward. And so it's absolutely critical. It can be done. And there are a lot of different ways and suggestions that we know, not just the funding, but we're talking about housing. We're talking about businesses. We're talking, yes, of course, about land. And we're talking about education opportunities. Because really, when we talk about in America, there's not just a wealth gap, there's an opportunity gap. And that's been present since 1850 and before. And it's something that reparations helps to close.
Thank you for all of your responses. We're going to move to question number 3, and I'm going to ask that Glenn Ivey be the first one to answer this question. And it is, billionaires and corporations have seen tremendous profit during the pandemic, but still do not pay the same percentage in taxes as lower wealth citizens. How do you plan to ensure the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes?
Well, I think it's a comprehensive approach that's needed. I know President Biden has started out with an effort to increase the tax rate. I believe it's from 27 to 29%, if I recall correctly, for upper income individuals. And some corporations need to pay additional taxes too. I know there's an effort to do sort of a reach taxes to companies who have moved out of the United States and gone to tax havens, like I believe it's Northern Ireland or Ireland, to try and get reduced tax rates. I think we need to try and address that. I believe the Biden administration is working with countries around the world. In fact, made some efforts in the past week to try and reduce the ability for companies to do that as well. But I think the challenge is going to be in part political as well. I think there's an argument that's been made that's blocked that by the Republican Party, who under Trump took things in the opposite direction and actually reduced taxes for corporations and upper income individuals under the old school, previously disproven trickle down approach. The Biden administration's tried to reverse that trend and move it in the other direction. We've run into some obstacles on that, and we're going to have a challenge to fight through all of those. But I think we have to keep pushing to make headway on that front, because there's an imbalance and unfairness that's coming from the tax structure. We need the additional funds to pay for many of the efforts that we want to try and put in place that also are being pushed by the Biden administration that would benefit people across the board. Some of the programs we just talked about, whether it's forgiving student loan debt, making it easier for people to go to school, expanding healthcare opportunities and availability, all of those things cost money. And these are the types of taxes that the Biden proposal has used as offsets, or argued should be offsets, to help to pay for those kinds of things. And then, finally, I think there's a big challenge with respect to the fairness piece of the challenges that the middle and working class is facing right now. Inflation's really piling on top of that in a way that's making things especially hard for working class people. Cost of groceries, cost of gas, all those things are regressive in the impact that they're having, and making it extremely difficult for people who are just having trouble keeping their head above water based on the pandemic, based on the impact on rents and mortgages that flowed from some of that, sometimes based on employment opportunities and transfer. I'm sorry. All right.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your response. Mr. Holmes, your response.
Yeah, I'd have to double down on Mr. Ivey as far as the I can't get it out, but the taxes, companies being located one way and paying, shipping taxes overseas and offshore accounts, and how they looked at getting that money back into the back into our tax structure. Also, obviously, as he mentioned, the Biden administration has raised the taxes on corporations, but I think that there's an opportunity to look at capital gains and how capital gains taxes right now, based on the Trump tax cut in 2017, how the capital gains taxes and some of the loopholes associated with them, because as we know, the capital gains, you can defer your capital gains into opportunity zones, and that's a tax shelter in some respects, because Prince George's County currently has 25 opportunity zones, and I think we can all count on one hand how many projects are actually happening there. So it was more of a tax giveaway than an economic generator here, at least for us in Prince George's County. So again, there are a number of loopholes, capital gains, repatriation of taxes that we need to look at. But also I want to kind of just dive into what Mr. Ivey was talking about, was looking at the middle income, middle tax Americans, and working class Americans, and how do we find tax offsets there, whether it's the child tax credits or some other things that can take some of the burden off. I mean, it's hard to have a gas tax holiday or a sales tax holiday, and we have those same corporations who aren't even paying taxes. So just think about that. We want a gas tax holiday, but every gas or oil company here this quarter had never seen these type of profits in one quarter in the history of their companies. And so we got to be careful that there's this great imbalance between those who have a much and those who have little. And so we have to really work across the aisle, if you will, to get that, because nothing's going to happen without Republican support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your response, Mr. Holmes. Delegate Angela Engel, same question.
Thank you. I absolutely support the billionaire minimum income tax, also known as the BMIT. This tax would apply for 20% of income. It only applies to the top 100%, or also known as of the 1% of American households worth over 100 million. And I think it's really important that we note that. I think it's something that should be done. The way that this works and what we know about this tax increase is that it would increase revenue by $360 billion over 10 years. And we know that it's only selected to affect about 700 billionaires. And, what you were absolutely right in what you said. We know based on the data that in 2021 alone, billionaires saw $1 trillion increase in wealth, as the rest of us, as we all know, struggled. And so this is something that I am absolutely in favor of. I think it's just one way that we get there. I also agree that we also need to look at how do we help those in the middle who often are, as a small business owner here in the county, I know how you fall right in between. We're nowhere near making enough money to qualify for some of those breaks, but we're making also just enough where we don't get some of the things that lower income families are getting. And so that's a hard place to be in. It's something that actually a lot of the people of Congressional District 4 are struggling with. And as your member of Congress, it's something that I'm tackling on day one.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Former Congresswoman Donna Edwards, your response.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is the preeminent question of our time, both to be able to meet our responsibilities and obligations and our goals, whether those goals are around climate change, nutrition, improving education, investing in our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure. It requires tax dollars to do that. And the fact is that people who are making over $400,000 are not treated fairly in the system. And what do I mean by that? Because all of the rest of us are bearing the burden of our tax system, while those who are making over $400,000 are getting away without paying their fair share. So we need to first repeal the Trump tax breaks, which are costing, in terms of our deficit, about $2 trillion. We need to ensure tax fairness by having a minimum corporate tax and minimum individual taxes. We need to increase that individual tax rate at the highest level up to 29%. I'd go back to the Reagan years in the 30%. We can do that. And then, of course, we need to close up all of those loopholes that allow corporations to get the benefit of the bargain here in the United States, but offshore their responsibility someplace else. And so there's a lot that we can do to make our tax system and tax structure fairer. And by doing that, it will enable us to meet all of the responsibilities and the goals that we have that benefit the broad range of the American people.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Curtis, your response.
Yes, I mean, it's quite simple. It's beyond time to make our corporations pay their fair share. Last year, ExxonMobil reported $200 billion in profit. They're already up to $600 billion, and it's just June. What's changed? Nothing but greed. And it's time to have a leader to step up there and put them on Front Street. And how do you do that? As a member of Congress, you sit on committees. And with my background in finance, economics, and accounting, the Ways and Means Committee will be a perfect fit for me. In this committee, I'll be able to subpoena these corporations, to bring them in, open up their tax books, and ask them what's going on. Also, we'll be able to introduce resolutions and new bills to close those corporate tax loopholes that they've been taking advantage of since probably before any of us were born. You see, it's just been an ongoing cycle in Congress, ongoing. You see, I'm not backed by no big business, nothing but family and love. So I'm coming unbiased. I'm coming to look at the books and state the facts and hold accountable all of those who haven't been taking care of their tax liabilities. Because once they start doing it, then we can have things like Medicare for all, community college, student loan debt forgiveness. This is huge. Once we take care of this, we open up a new future for ourselves and our kids going forward. So we need to do everything we can, and I will, once elected, to make sure everybody hold and take care of their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. We're going to move to the fourth question now. And I do want to note that in the last question, Delegate Angela Angel, I may have said Angela Engel, and please forgive me for doing that. My apologies. Clearly, I did not have enough caffeine this morning. So we're moved to question number 4. And I'm going to ask Delegate Angela. I'm going to ask Delegate Angela Angel to answer this question first. And the question is as follows. Access to transportation is becoming increasingly difficult. And as gas prices rise and there are limited public transportation options in Maryland, what policies will you implement to secure District 4 to receive adequate funding for transportation and infrastructure?
I'm chuckling a little bit because I also the current Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and I went to high school together. Full disclosure, and I also was his Black engagement director for his campaign. So we've actually talked a bit about infrastructure, and very much so. There actually is quite a bit of infrastructure funding that has come out of some of the bills that were recently passed, and I'm proud of the work that actually has been done and some of the advocacy that's been happening by our current members of Congress who have been requesting funding for those infrastructure funds to come to Prince George's County. You are absolutely right. I have lived through not having a car in this county and very well about the routes of the bus or the lack thereof, and the way that the trains run. And so part of what we need to do is really continue the strong advocacy for some of the funds that have already come out in the budget to make sure that we are expanding bus routes, so that to make sure that we are looking at some of the train lines, and to begin advocating for the WMATA funding to make sure that we're not just looking at expanding in Montgomery County and in Virginia, but that Prince George's County is receiving the transportation funds that are currently available. So that's, I think, very important. We also need to look at expanding the different options of transportation that is here. Part of that is legislation, but part of that is also sitting down with WMATA. Part of that is sitting down with our current Department of Transportation that runs our bus routes. I actually sponsored a bill and did a task force on transportation in Prince George's County. It was specifically sponsored around our school children and bus transportation, but I've already had those work groups and talked with those community members, stakeholders, as well as the heads of those departments, and would gladly reactivate that work group for Congress to look at how we can reallocate the current routes and fight together for funding to expand transportation and these options in this county. So it's one of the things that, once again, I've already worked on. I know how to get it done, and I will continue that work as your member of Congress. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, your response.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
My apologies. Thank you for your response, Delegate Angela Angel. Mr. Holmes, your response, same question.
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. Access to transportation is becoming increasingly difficult, and as gas prices rise, and there are limited public transportation options in Maryland, what policies will you implement to secure District 4 receives the adequate funding for transportation and infrastructure? Your response, please.
Thank you. So a lot of people may not know this, but Prince George's is the epicenter right now of transportation projects. A couple of weeks ago, Representative Hoyer and some other elected officials announced initial funding to start a light rail line from Southern Maryland into Branch Avenue, which is 7 of those stops, 6 to 7 of those stops will be in the District 4. We have Largo Metro. We have the money that was the bond money that was approved by Governor Hogan and County Exec Alsobrooks for the Blue Line corridor, starting at Largo Metro going out to Capitol Heights. We have New Carrollton Metro, which has a MARC, Amtrak, the start of the Purple Line, all there as a hub, along with new WMATA headquarters as a central point of for transportation. We have Greenbelt Metro, which is along with Landover Landover Mall, is considered one of the final 2 locations for the new FBI relocation. So we have infrastructure here. The problem is it's all disjointed. There hasn't been the leadership to connect it all together. And so one of the policies that I'd like to put forth, one of my first ones, is to amend the president's infrastructure bill, because currently that bill does not provide funding for transit-oriented development projects. And so how do we incentivize developers to build around metro stations? So we passed the historic infrastructure bill, but no direct resources for TOD, which is a targeted and incentive-laden area that's been designated by both the state and the county for development. And so by targeting some of those resources, and we can do an amendment to a bill and take some of the American Rescue Plan money that hasn't been spent and reallocate that money to incentivize development around metro stations. We have 15 in the county. We have the Purple Line. We now have initial funding for a light rail. So we have the infrastructure in place. We lack the leadership and imagination to connect those dots and bring the incentives to bear to have developers come in and develop the housing equity that we need, the office stock that will take the burden off the tax base here in the county. And so we have everything we need except for the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Former Congresswoman Edwards, your response, please.
Thank you very much. I am very proud of having served on the Transportation Committee for almost a decade, the entire time that I served in Congress. In that time, under my leadership, we got the first tranche of money to fund the Blue Line, $100 million that came from the federal government to begin the Purple Line, rather, to begin the work on the Purple Line. I also, during my time in Congress, got initial funding for the environmental and other studies that were needed to bring rail across the Wilson Bridge so that we could begin to connect these metro stations throughout Prince George's County. I also got agreements and funding from the federal government to make sure that around our metro stations, and Prince George's County has the lion's share of metro stations in the system, that the General Services Administration was required to first consider co-location for federal facilities with metro stations. That will have a tremendous benefit for Prince George's County, and already is inuring to the benefit of our county, because we have 2 locations that are being considered for the location of the FBI headquarters because of the legislation that I worked on. I look forward to rejoining the Transportation Committee, using my seniority and leadership and knowledge of transportation. I got funding for our bus system to add clean buses into our system, but we need additional resources to make sure that the operations and maintenance of our metro system is improved so that people have confidence in the system and want to use it, to connect the spokes of the system, because more people are traveling east and west, and not just into the District of Columbia for their work. This will have tremendous economic benefit for the county. And lastly, let me say that, in fact, in the last transportation authorization, there is money available for transit-oriented development and for metropolitan planning. And so I would use my leadership, knowledge, and experience to make sure that that is delivered for Prince George's County.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Mr. Curtis, your response, please.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's 2 parts to this question. And the first part is, how do we continue to get the funding? Every year, we already have allocations coming down to this district for transportation funding. We have to be very careful on how we're spending it. Prime example, we have brand new 7,000 series rail cars for Metro that we just bought 3-4 years ago, and all of them are sitting over at the shop. That don't make sense. We got to make sure we invest into good opportunity, make sure the maintenance is done on these, make sure someone is always keeping an eye on this new equipment that we're getting, or we're just going to have money down the drain. The second part of it is this. We got these brand new $500,000 buses, electric vehicles, but the driver is making only $17, barely making a rent. So, that don't make sense. So we need to balance it, whereas we continue to get new infrastructure into the county, but we also take care of the people who are operating and maintaining the system. That's how you continue to keep the wheel rolling. You can't just look at one side. You also got to take care of the people who are there every day, night and day, taking care of this. So I plan to bring, with the corporate tax loopholes that we're going to close, bring more additional funding to the county to open up the resources for the transportation. I definitely support extending the rail cars down to Southern Maryland, Baltimore, joining them all together. But I also support raising the wages of the people who take care and monitor our system. And that's going to be my plan.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Ivey, your response.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, first of all, we need to finish the Purple Line. It's taken far too long already. And, it's gotten off track, and it's going to cost more as a result of that. But the concept is right, the east to west connections. And I think it does a lot to benefit a lot of the sites in Prince George's County, including the termination point at New Carrollton, which has already begun flourishing. You can see the businesses that are building there, the residences that are being built there, because it's sort of a perfect site from a transportation hub standpoint. With respect to rail, you've got the metro there, you've got Amtrak there, you've also got the highways there, the Beltway and Route 50. So it's a perfect spot for a lot of development. And we've been able to bring in some really top-notch corporations there that have been great for the county. I think you need better leadership at Metro. I think we just saw in recent months, the top two people resigned, in part because, as was pointed out a moment ago, the subway cars were substandard and weren't maintained properly. But you also had a failure to keep training the conductors. So you have half of them that had lost their certification. So you had problems like that. And I also think you're going to need some creativity there. We have to understand that COVID's had a very negative impact on public transportation. I think they're trying to rebuild back to the point where they get that ridership back up. But they need that revenue stream in order to sort of get back to where they were. And even back in the pre-COVID days, they were underfunded. I think the infrastructure bill has a lot of positive aspects to it. Certainly the funding has been pretty significant. I heard Chris Van Hollen talking about the many infrastructure projects that are going to be funded based on the passage of that bill. I do think the smart growth approach, in other words, trying to use some of that funding that targets areas where you have more density and also where you have businesses and residences that you can either build out or build upon, I think makes a lot of sense and allow us to use more of the metro sites. I've been hearing people talking about taking advantage of the metro sites for probably 25 years. And they've been right all along. We just need to actually get it done. We've got a few of them up and working, like I mentioned, New Carrollton a moment ago. And the ones that are up and working, it's clear, are fantastic economic engines for the county. And then finally, the U.S. Census building is another example. I think they're going to am I running out of my? Okay.
Yep. Thank you for your response. Only have 2 minutes. Thank you so much. And the fifth and final question, I'm going to share in just a moment. We're going to begin with Mr. Holmes. We'll have the first bite at the apple, if you will. And the fifth and final question is as follows. And thank you for your response. I didn't say that, Mr. Ivey. The fifth and final question is, as crime increases, calls for more police, as well as police accountability, are being made at local, state, and federal levels. What legislation will you introduce or support that will address these issues? Mr. Holmes, your response.
Yeah, thank you. Having a family member who's a current police officer in Prince George's County, we happen to be the same age. He's a 30-year officer. I take my cues from him because he's on the front line, even though he's in leadership now. And one of the things he's always said to me is that the police and schools don't create revenue. We only spend what's been allocated to us by elected officials. And he said, so one of the things that he would suggest, and I would agree with him, is better candidates. There's a pool that the police department currently is getting is not up to par to meet a 21st century protect and serve organization. And so they need better tools to screen and recruit better candidates and then do a better job in training. So I think that's first, one of the first things. The second thing is, at least growing up in this county, as I mentioned, I'm a third generation. we had police officers that actually were my neighbors, that actually lived in this county. So it was something, called community policing that seems to have gone out the window now in the social media age, and with a lot of officers not living in this county. I mean, you can go down to Showplace Arena at the end of the night and you see a bunch of police cars sitting there because you can't take the car outside the county. And so we need to do a better job of recruiting and having those folks live and have some kind of connection to the community. The other thing is we need to do a better job with coordinating that with our community groups and our civic organizations. There's a disconnect right now between community groups, civic organization, and the business community as it relates to overall policing. Because again, the police are not the first responder. The person who's making the call is actually the first responder who's giving that information to the 911 operator. So we have to build better connections and relationships in the community. So when that call is made, it's being received and the right information is given, and they're being received back in a response way. And then the last thing I'll say is this: we hear a lot about criminal justice. My dad's an attorney, and he always would tell me, if you go down to the Supreme Court, it says the justice system, because criminal justice already says you're a criminal before you reach justice. And I always thought you were innocent before proven guilty. So I think the narrative around criminal justice, should, because I think words have power. So I think there's an opportunity to really change that narrative around criminal justice. It's really the justice system.
Thank you for your response.
And we want sentencing reform. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your response, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Ivey, your response, please. We can't hear you, sir.
Sorry about that. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think we can do both, and we've demonstrated that in Prince George's County. There's some challenges across the country. San Francisco earlier this week, where there's a suggestion perhaps that the public is giving up on the approach of trying to reform the criminal justice system, because it is about criminal conduct and prosecuting people and sending them to jail. And we need to make sure that we do that in the right way, because if you don't, you end up with 2.2 million people in jail and many innocent people in jail, and many people in jail for longer terms than they should be, as we've seen with some of the disparate sentences that people have gotten. So I think we need to make sure we do a couple of things. One is to make sure we get enough police officers. I've never been in favor of the defund the police approach. I think that's not only a bad slogan, but a bad approach. I've been to community meetings across the county. Nobody is suggesting that we do anything remotely approaching that. Many of them want more police officers on the street. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's just a question of how you do it and what they're supposed to be doing. So, for example, using police officers to stop cars on the street where there's no indication that the car is involved in any kind of significant criminal conduct, simply because you want to do traffic stops and see if you can check the cars to see if they're guns or weapons or contraband. That's a misuse of our resources for a couple of reasons. One is you're wasting police officers' time, because the vast majority of those stops don't result in any kind of criminal charges being filed, because they're just stopping regular people, usually younger Black males who are driving a car. And then second, it really rips the fabric of the relationship between the police department and the community, because people know why they're being stopped and they know it's not fair. So I think we need to move away from that. The Biden administration, I want to say it was 10 billion, but it might be more, but roughly they put up more money to hire more police officers, which I'm fine with. What I didn't like about what they did was they didn't put any strings to the money that would require police departments who get that funding to use it in the right way. We've got to move beyond the Dodge City war on crack stuff, where they just jump out squads, they throw everybody on the fence and arrest as many as possible. We need targeted policing where people work in the community, figure out who the real problem makers are, and focus the resources on that. And then finally, even for the guys that get arrested, even for the guys that get convicted, even for the guys that go to jail, they're still human beings. They're still our brothers and sisters. We need to make sure we do everything we can to help them get reform in jail and then become productive members of society when they come back out. You're shaking your head. Did I run over my time again?
You're right there, right at the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ivey. Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Delegate Angela Angel, your response, please.
Seems we're all struggling with this mute button. I actually am really proud of the fact that I have been helping with two different pieces of legislation that are both presented before Congress now. One was called the Breathe Act. You can find out, don't have a long time to monitor, but go to breatheact.org and you can find out more information on that. There's also the People's Response Act, that peoplesresponseact.com. One was with Ayanna Pressley, the other was with Cori Bush. But part of this approach is a new approach to policing, where we are looking at not just looking at carceral systems, meaning, grab people and lock them up, but really looking at how do we provide services? How do we use this to get mental health? Because so many of the calls, so many of the tragedies we look at were actually mental health calls that should have been responders that should have responded to these incidents. And our police, aren't qualified to do that type of work, but we do have professionals that are. So let's get more of them into the community. It's looking at what type of programming needs to be added to allow for things that people could turn to outside of criminal activities. I live in the Inner Beltway. We actually have not really had a representative in the Inner Beltway. I live in District Heights, which is an amazing city, but I also used to live in Woodland Springs for years. And some of the worst incidents of violence, I have had to shield my children as we walked in and walked past criminal crime tape. And as we looked at bodies that were across the street. So I know how important it is that we have, response, but I also know that some of those kids just have no place to go, right? And some of them are suffering from illnesses and issues and trauma that we're just not addressing. So there are ways that we can do this, that we can build our community, that we can have trauma-informed policing, that we can have services that are building within the community that makes this a safe and beautiful place for all of us to thrive. And I've already been working on those bills in the current Congress, and will continue that work as your elected representative. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Former Congresswoman Edwards, your response, please.
There we go. That unmute button, I'll tell you. Well, I appreciate the question. In my previous time in Congress, I spent some time visiting adult correctional facilities, men's and women's facilities, juvenile facilities, really trying to understand what it is that we could do systemically to keep people from being incarcerated. I happen to believe that the greatest crime fighting tool that we have is education and our education system, because the data simply show that when people receive an education and go on into the economy, that they do not become criminals. And so I think that the more investment that we make to make sure that people don't go into the system is about the most important investment that we can. I think it's important to have law enforcement, but to have effective law enforcement, to have law enforcement that works with communities and in communities, and that's embedded in communities so that there is mutual trust between communities and law enforcement. I think it's obviously really important for us to ensure that we deal with mental health and other issues that cause people to be engaged in the criminal justice system in ways that are unhealthy to them and unhelpful in our communities. During my time in Congress, I introduced legislation to provide for Pell Grants for people who are incarcerated so that they could get an education. I introduced legislation to remove military equipment from our law enforcement agencies. There's no way that law enforcement agencies, whether in this county or around the country, should receive military-grade equipment that I found on the battlefield when I traveled to Afghanistan. All of these are important ways in which we can continue to both support law enforcement, support our communities, and build the kind of trust that we need to make our communities safe. And of course, investing in changing the culture of law enforcement. And I don't think that that is an easy task. It is one that requires concerted effort at every single level of government. And I look forward to going back into Congress to make sure that we can give our community the tools that they need to have effective law enforcement in our communities.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Thank you for your response. Mr. Curtis, your response, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think bottom line is this, you got to get to the basics of this problem. And what it is when it comes to police officers is we just don't have enough of them. We need to absolutely fund the police department and get more officers on the street. But that's a hard sale today. You telling me I got to go out here and put my life on the line every day for $40,000? Yeah, okay. That's what we're facing right now. And it's like that across the board. So we got to start at the issue. We got to make sure they have adequate support at home, make sure they are funded so they could go out and do their job. The second part of that is we got to have more community engagement. You see, right now, the perception is you only see police when something bad is going on. What about when something good is happening? What about at the basketball game? What about at the PTA? We got to have more community engagement. Growing up in District Heights, when I was going to District Heights Elementary School, the police chief was out there every day shaking hands with the students. Where is that at? This problem is a simple problem. It's a moral problem. We got away from community and the police working together. It's like a division, like we're seeing in our politics. We got to break that wall down. These people are sons, fathers, sisters, and brothers, just like we are. And we have to connect to each other on that level first and not just look at each other as somebody in the suit and somebody that's not in the suit. So I think we start there. So for one is I absolutely believe we should fund the police department, make sure they have higher wages, make sure they're secure in their job. We need them. But we also want to make sure they're in the community, not just when something bad is happening, but they're there when something good is happening. And I plan to change that once in office.
Thank you for your response. Now we'll move to closing statements from each of the candidates. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for their closing response. We'll begin in the same order, we'll follow the same order that we did for the opening statements. And the order is as follows: Angela Angel, James Levi Curtis Jr., Donna Edwards, Gregory Holmes, and Glenn Ivey. Candidates, you may begin.
Thank you again for having me. It was great to be here and to be with an esteemed panel. I respect each and every one of the folks here, and many of you I have worked with, and those that I haven't, I hold in very high esteem. As I have said in answering these questions, the issues that we are talking about, the issues that we are facing, that the people of the 4th District are facing, are issues that I not only am experiencing and living with you, as a small business owner, as a attorney, as a woman and a mom with children in our school system, but I'm experiencing them with you as an advocate, as somebody that understands the policies and things that need to be enacted to change them. And I'm not talking about things that I want to do, that I hope to do. I am talking about things that I have done in every space that I have occupied, in every elected office that I have held. I have been able to show up and give you hard work and real results. And it's something that I did as a member of the House of Delegates, passing more bills than any other member of either chambers, as bringing changes for prescription drugs, looking at our foreclosure problem, bringing the banks here. And I also showed up and gave you great constituent services. If you go to my website, angelaforcongress.com, you'll see when I was in office, we had donuts with the delegates, where every month on the second Saturday, I was at Krispy Kreme sitting here talking with my constituents. We'll revive that again with Coffee with the Congresswoman. If you remember DAP Day, where I brought the men of the community out to our schools. That wasn't something that I had to do as a legislator, but it was something that I did because my heart is to serve the people of this district. And I've done it time and time again. And I've done it in every office. I've done it as a member in the O'Malley, helping the O'Malley administration. I've done it as a member of the House of Delegates, but also as staff. I've done it for Council District 6. I've done it under County Executive Rashern Baker for the Department of Environment. I have been an advocate for this community and showed up time and time again. And I've passed the bills. I know how to implement the policies, and I am here with you. I'll see you in the community knocking on doors. I'll see you out there sign waving. Go to angelaforcongress.com to join us. We call ourselves the A-Team because we all need an angel in Congress. We need a fighter and an advocate. And that is something I've been time and time again. And it is something that I will be in Congress for you. So vote for Angela Angel, because we all need an angel in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Angela Angel. Now we'll hear from James Levi Curtis Jr.
Thank you. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. We're not insane here in Prince George's County, and this July, we got a chance to show it. My name is James Curtis, and I'm running to be your next representative of Congressional District 4. I'm young, I'm hungry, I'm motivated for change. We know what's happening in this economy. Bills are piling sky high, money is low, morale is low, and it's time we need new leadership. I just asked that on July 19th, you go to the ballot box, you make your decision based on the future you want to see. And I hope today what you heard from me is exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Former Congresswoman Donna F. Edwards.
Well, good afternoon again, and thank you all very much for your time and attention this afternoon, and to Reed Temple for hosting us today. And let me just say to each of the candidates, I know that we are all serious people and that we take seriously the responsibility to represent the 4th Congressional District. I would ask for your vote and your support because I would bring my experience, my leadership, and my seniority back into the House of Representatives at a time that is so critical for so many of our families across the 4th Congressional District and around the country. We know that families are struggling. We know that our businesses, particularly our small businesses here in Prince George's County, are struggling. This is a really difficult time, and we need serious leadership to tackle it. I look forward to rejoining my colleagues, not to regurgitate ideas of the past, but to generate ideas for the future that are going to make a difference for our communities, to make sure that each of us has the ability to take care of ourselves and our families, to grow a future for our young people that is better than the one that we've had. I know that's what my family and my parents wanted for us. I came to Prince George's County 40 years ago, and I raised my son here in this county, not by chance, but by choice, because I believe in our county. I believe in the 4th Congressional District, and I know that I can bring the experience and the leadership that is necessary to take on the challenges in these challenging times. And so I look forward to your vote. Voting has begun now. I know some of you have already received your ballots. Early voting begins on July 5th, and of course, Election Day on July 19th. Your vote is not one that should be taken lightly, and I don't. And I look forward to rejoining the Congress, fighting for you on your behalf, sometimes challenging Democrats of our own party to do right by this county and by our communities. And I thank you very much for your time and attention, and I ask you for your vote. And if you want to learn more about me, please go to Donna Edwards, 4congress.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Now we'll hear from Gregory Holmes. Mr. Holmes?
Thank you. And again, Reed Temple, outstanding job with your Social Action Committee for putting on this forum. I'm a Christian, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a business owner, I'm a mentor. These extraordinary times, and they require extraordinary people to stand up and meet this moment. There are 4 particular things, 4 reasons why I decided to run, really. In 2020, I had an opportunity to be a Joe Biden delegate to the National Democratic Convention. I launched an organization called Black Businesses Matter after the George Floyd murder, because people always talked about the Black community, but never talked about the impact of Black business in that community. I launched with the grassroots group Black Homes Matter, because in Prince George's County, there's a cap on our home appraisals, which directly affect our ability to pull equity out and invest in being entrepreneurs and in our businesses. And then the last thing was, I believe I've been called to serve. working on a current opportunity with the Afghan reunification project with the State Department. And so I've seen firsthand the power and the influence and the ability of the government to move and impact the lives of other people. And so when this opportunity, this open seat came open to serve, I believe I've been called right now in this moment to fill this gap of leadership that we have to take Prince George's County to the next level. And so with your support and your belief in the Black economic strategy of equity, investment, and empowerment, we can create the opportunities that create a generational wealth for our communities. So on July 19th, which is primary day, July 5th, which is early vote, I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. This is an opportunity for my family to serve your family. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Holmes. Now we will hear from the next candidate. Mr. Ivey, take it away.
Thank you very much. And thanks again to Reed Temple and the AKAs for putting this on. I greatly appreciate the impact you have on this community and the region. Frankly, it's you're an outstanding leader in the faith community, and we're very fortunate to have you here. I ask for your support in this race for Congress based on my record of past successes, the ability to get things done, even things that people didn't think could be done at the time. As I mentioned before, when I was state's attorney, I came into the office at a time when people didn't think we could hold police accountable for crossing the line and using excessive force. We changed that very quickly with convictions for officers who'd done it, including long jail sentences for those that had. There was some thought that we couldn't bring down the crime rates, especially the violent crime rates and homicides, because they'd been rising and rising for so many years. But we turned that around quickly too, working with the police, with other stakeholders in the community like Reed Temple and others in the faith community. And we brought those violent offenses down, especially the homicides, to 30 and 40-year lows. And that continued after I left office. So I know that we built something that left a positive legacy and moved the county in the right direction. And we also created a series of efforts to reach out to people and make sure that we got to, especially kids, but not only, people who'd gotten into trouble, people who'd gone to jail, people who'd made mistakes. I believe in second chances, and we put our money where our mouth was. To the extent I had budgetary funds to do it, we did that. Frequently we didn't, so we'd go out and get grants. I didn't care who got the money as long as the money got to the people who knew how to use it the right way. And that's why so many of those programs with respect to reentry or domestic violence awareness or intervention and prevention programs for young kids, that's why so many of those were so effective at the time. And even after I left office, I left public service, or I left public office, but I didn't leave public service. I stayed involved. I recently served on the, Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks Police Reform Task Force. And as part of that, we worked with other stakeholders, elected officials, judges, public servants and community advocates to propose other reforms that would help get the police not only in check with respect to the use of the force that they have, but get them back on the right track with respect to the tactics that they use to investigate these crimes. And then lastly, you don't have to be an elected official to make a positive impact. For example, my family, Jolene in particular, who's a member of the county council, but we've worked with Reed Temple and others. Carla Cash, for example, at Reed Temple, have been outstanding in distributing meals to people at the peak of the COVID pandemic to make sure that people who couldn't get to work or were having trouble getting to the store were able to get access to food. We got masks to people, including people at the hospital who didn't have them yet. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was nothing available for many of them. So we've done it in the past. We can do it. We can do it in the future. I've got experience in Congress. As I mentioned, I worked for Congressman John Conyers, worked for Senator Paul Sarbanes on the Senate side, and ended up on the leadership staff of Tom Daschle. I know my way around up there. I know I can hit the ground running. And I know these are critical times. We just had a series of shootings here in Prince George's County. And the January 6 hearings, if you missed that, the Republic is at risk here. So give me a chance to go represent you. I promise you, I won't let you down.
Thank you, Mr. Ivey. And thank you to all of the candidates, the Democratic candidates who shared with us today. Hopefully, the constituents in the District 4, you heard what you needed to hear today to cast your vote, because your vote matters. Your voice matters. So let's transition now to a quick video, and I'll be back in just a moment. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. One of my favorite songs that we often sing at Reed Temple AME Church. And so appropriate for the times that we're in, these very challenging times. But I remain in faith and excited about what is to come. We're going to move now in transition to our Republican candidates. I would be remiss if I did not share with you that all Republican candidates were invited. Only one Republican candidate for Congressional Representative District 4 was able to join us today. So we will not be asking questions today. What we will do is we will hear from George McDermott, Republican Party candidate for Congressional Representative District 4. Mr. McDermott, we look forward to hearing from you now. Your 3-minute response.
I'm here today to join in this debate and candidates. All these candidates are coming before you today asking for your vote. I'm not like them. unlike them, I will be asking also. But my whole premise in coming to you today is to let the people know that our nation is in grave danger. I was born in Prince George's County in 1945, Cheverly Hospital, and raised all but 5 years of my life in Prince George's County. I and my partners have put many millions of dollars into development along the Branch Avenue corridor at Sittler Parkway, and built businesses. At one time had over 200 employees. It was called Washington Racket and Fitness Club in Crystal Skate, which both have now been torn down because of what happened in 1995. But we have a bigger problem in this nation. Everybody comes to you and asks, and they're saying, please vote for me, vote for me. Have you ever asked these candidates what their credentials are? They give you their credentials as lawyers and public servants, but does any of them inform you that under Title 22 of Foreign Relations and Intercourse Act, Chapter 11, identifies all public officials of the United States as foreign agents? Because in Section 28, 3002, Section 15A also states that the United States is now a federal corporation and not a government. I've been active in victims' rights for the last 28 years in all of the state of Maryland. All over, I go help individuals freely and give them information as to why their properties are being stolen, their lives are being destroyed, their children are being locked up. And you go to these public agencies, you go to the FBI, it's a public agency, Justice Department. I've petitioned every member on the House and Senate of the United States numerous times. Walked into their office. I've petitioned every member of the Maryland House and Senate, and no one will stand up for the rights of citizens. I make it my life's work, and God has put me in. I believe that God has directed me to do this. I've been a member of Forest Heights Baptist Church for almost 57 years now, and God comes first. And God helps those who help themselves. And we must get to the bottom of whether these people running for office have proper credentials and whether they're even representing our American public as a whole. Because according to the published law, the Foreign Relations and Intercourse Act, in 1933-45, all laws in the United States were secretly transferred to international control, and we are under UCC control. Now, I have a little bit more information than the average person on this, because I have been fighting this in the courts as well as helping my fellow people, residents of Prince George's County, state of Maryland. We have a crisis in confidence. You just saw the insurrection at the Capitol of the United States, and anybody who looked at the committee investigating January 6th the other day, each one of these people took an oath of office to uphold and defend our Constitution.
Thank you.
And now they're hiding behind doors and saying, no, I didn't. Please reelect me. I think the voters should know about this.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Thank you for your 3-minute response, and we certainly thank you for taking the time.
Okay, well, you have a blessed day. I thank the members of your congregation for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just keep up the fight. God bless and have a good day.
God bless you as well, sir.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining this important candidate forum for the District 4. My hope and prayer is that the constituents in District 4 are now informed educated, inspired to use their voices and use their vote to make a difference. It matters. So stay curious, stay engaged, and more importantly, vote. Thank you to all of the candidates for being engaged and sharing your perspectives. And of course, I certainly appreciate the James A. Parker Lay Organization for their commitment, tireless commitment, to ensure that voters are informed, particularly in the faith community. Thank you to Pastor Mark E. Whitlock and, of course, the wonderful Iota Gamma Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and our president, Cheryl Williams, for her tireless leadership. And now I'm going to turn it over to Terry Williams, who will take us toward the end. And thank you for your steadfast leadership, Terry.
Thank you, Reverend Janelle. And thank you to all of our candidates for participating this afternoon. And best wishes to you in your campaigns. And to our moderator, Janelle, you did an awesome job this afternoon moderating this event. It has been our privilege to co-sponsor this activity with the James A. Parker Lay Organization for Social Action. We at Iota Gamma Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated just considered it an honor and a privilege. We hope that this hour has been an hour of empowerment and that you would take all of the information that you have learned that was presented this afternoon and share it with your social networks. We encourage everyone to participate in the election process on July 19th. Go out and make your voice heard. Cast your vote. It's important to the community. It's important to the society as a whole. Your voice is your vote, and your vote does matter. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Terry. And now we're going to turn it over to my sister in ministry, Miss Lynette Cosby.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out. I'm going to close us out on this, our last session. I want to thank our pastor, Reverend Dr. Mark E. Whitlock Jr., our First Lady, Reverend Mia, Reed Temple officers and members, the James A. Parker Lay Organization officers and members, the AK Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Iota Gamma Omega chapter, all the candidates that participated in this forum and all the other forums. And of course, I cannot forget and will not forget our fabulous tech team from the virtual suite. Don't forget to register to vote. You have until June 28th to register to vote in the primary election. You also can check your registration to make sure that it's correct. You know where your polling places are, or if you need to get a mail-in ballot, all of that information is on our website at reedtemple.org/events. Look for the Voting Blitz campaign. It will take you directly to the State Board of Elections so that you can get your information, register to vote, update your information, anything that you need. Early voting starts in July. So you need to do all of this by June 28th in order to vote in the primary elections. And finally, as always, I'd like to end with one of my quotes from my favorite voting right activist, Fannie Lou Hamer. This time I'm going to tell you what she said, and we're going to end the session on this. The only way we can make this thing of equality a reality in America is to do all we can to destroy this system and bring this out to the light that has been under the cover all these years. Dismantling strongholds requires your voice. Your voice is your vote, and your vote is your voice. You have the power. We are empowered to bring down the strongholds of the system that is holding things back from us. And so I encourage you all to get out to vote, and thank you for coming. This is our last session, session 4 for the candidate forums. You can rewatch all of the sessions. You can watch them on YouTube at Reed Temple, look for Reed Temple. You can also watch them on Facebook at the Reed Temple Social Action page. We've had 4 candidates forums. Candidate forum session 1 was for the county council districts and the sheriff. Candidate forum session 2 was for the county council at large and the county executive. The candidate forum session 3 last week was for attorney general and governor, and today was for congressional district 4. So if you still haven't made up your mind, you have time to go back and view those. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you watching, and have a good evening. Goodbye.